UK we have 6 species of deer. We have the red deer, the roe deer, the fallow deer, muntjac, Chinese water deer and sika. Of the 6 of those species, 2 of them are indigenous to the UK. However, the fallow deer, which has been present since the Normans in the 11th century, is now considered to be an indigenous species here within the UK. I did a previous video on the red deer and I'll leave a link to that at the end. When it comes to wildlife encounters and the opportunities to photograph deer close up, then the fallow deer is a great subject. In this video we'll look at the best strategies for finding, watching and photographing the fallow deer. And what we'll do is we'll look at how to identify them, we'll look at their habitat and where to find them, we'll look at their behaviour, especially during the rut. I'll go through my approach to photographing fallow deer and I'll give you some top tips along the way. Okay, so how do we identify the fallow deer? Well, the fallow deer is our second largest deer here in the UK. It's medium sized and it stands at about 0.9 of a metre at the shoulder. Fallow deer are mainly tan and fawn in colour. They have white spots. They have a distinctive rump, which is white. They have a black and white tail, which happens to be the longest tail of any deer we have here in the UK. And the rump has a black horseshoe outline. Fallow deer antlers, here in the UK, fallow deer are the only deer that have what's known as palmate antlers. The antlers are part flattened and their size depends on actually the age of the deer itself and the habitat that they live in. They become full sized for fallow deer about the age of 3 to 4 years old. Fallow deer are also variable in colour and there's 4 variations. You have the common, tan and fawn colour. You have white, they're not albino. If you look at the eye on a white fallow deer, it's dark in colour. Then you have menal, which is a pale coloured fallow deer. And then you have menalistic, which is sort of like a black chocolate colour. So there are 4 variations of colour on the fallow deer. Fallow male deers are known as bucks, the females are known as does, and the young are known as fawns. Top tip, safety first. Anytime you go to photograph deer, especially if you're on your own, then you have to think about safety first. During the rut especially. Bucks are full of testosterone and they can be very aggressive. The golden rule is never get between a buck and a doe and never get between bucks that are sizing each other up. I would advise you, if you're going to photograph deer, to wear drab coloured clothing and to stay downwind if possible. When it comes to the fallow deer's call, it's especially important during the rut, and that's the real time that you hear them being very vocal. Calls are a mixture of barks, calls, alarms, and groans. The males have a mixture of loud belching, groaning, snoring and groaning, a bit like me, my wife would probably say. And then you have your does and your fawns which give off sharp barks when they're alarmed. Top tip, tracks and signs. One skill as a wildlife photographer I believe that's very beneficial is to be able to identify the tracks and the signs of the subject that you're trying to photograph. It was an area when I first began wildlife photography that I wasn't too strong on. However, I did a lot of research into it. I made a video on tracks and signs, and that has helped me to get closer to the subjects that I want to photograph. When it comes to the fallow deer's habitat, fallow are the most numerous deer that we have here in the UK, and they can be found in England, Wales, but less in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. And I have photographed fallow deer in the wild on the Isle of Mull. Fallow thrive in diverse habitats, including things like heathland, moorland, farmland, woodland and deer parks. Fallow deer in forest and woodlands, mainly deciduous woodlands, where they'll be found feeding on trees and on the ground where they're foraging for food. On farmland, in some rural areas, fallow deer can be found grazing in open fields. Deer parks and national reserves, national parks and deer parks have very established herds of deer, and again populations of fallow deer will be found in woodland adjacent to open land and field. Top tip, deer parks. If you're new to wildlife photography, or if you've never photographed deer before, then I would advise you to visit a deer park that's near to you. They're great places to go to, and you can get quite close to them, but remember, safety first. Fallow are a great subject to photograph and connect with, and you can get some great images and you can witness deer behaviour close up. So top tip, visit a deer park. When it comes to the fallow deer's diet, they will graze on things like grass and foliage, and they'll take fallen nuts in winter. If there's a nearby water source, that can be a good place to set yourself up and sit and wait for the fallow deer to turn up and drink, and that will give you a good opportunity to get some photographs. Top tip, time of the year. Today it's mid-October. There's no better time of year to photograph deer, and especially the fallow, because this is the time of the year when the deer are at the peak and they're coming into the rut. It's a beautiful day today. Hopefully I'll get some images of the deer rutting later on, but this is the time of the year to do it. Bucks and the does get together late September, early October, prior to the rut starting. And as I said, there's no better time of year to witness fallow at their peak. However, again, you need to remember that bucks at this time become very active and aggressive, engaging in dramatic displays which you can capture, and that's the idea, is to capture these deer at their peak and during the rut. Top tip, time of the year. What I'd like to do now is just take a minute or a time out to look forward to a project I'm working on at the moment, and that's for wildlife photography, and I call it the Circle of Fear. That's how, as wildlife photographers, we can recognise the signs that wildlife give off when they're alerted to danger. By being able to recognise those signs and being able to react to them in the correct way, it will allow you to get closer to your subject. So look forward to the Circle of Fear coming soon at Kevin Hatley Photography. And now back to the video. When it comes to fallow deer behaviour during the rut, bucks will normally stick to their favourite areas and they'll try to impress the does. What they'll do is they will challenge other bucks by walking parallel with them, with their contenders, and then they'll start preparing for action. And what they'll then start doing is you'll see them carrying out things like play fights, thrashing the vegetation, they'll make scrapes and wallows, they'll actually urinate in them, and they'll roll in it. Fallow deer cologne. Fallow deer are most active at dawn and dusk during the rut, when most rutting activity is over, normally by mid-morning. What you'll find is that the bucks will tend to lie up whilst the does will go about feeding close by. Top tip, pick a spot. This is especially true if you're going to photograph deer out in a deer park. Deer parks can get very busy with walkers, joggers, people with dogs, and that activity often moves the deer on. You don't want to go chasing them, so pick a spot. So I've picked my spot here, I'm going to set myself up and I'm going to wait for the deer to come into this area. The position that you're going to pick needs to provide you with cover, but also you need to remember things like the direction of the sun and the direction of the wind, so that you don't disturb your subject. So just sit and wait for the deer to turn up, and again, remember safety. When I was talking about picking the right spot, I've actually got a small herd of fallow deer approaching me now, and I've stood behind this cover. They haven't seen me yet, and hopefully they'll get a little bit closer and I'll get a little bit of video to add to this clip. So how do we go about photographing fallow deer? Well, as I previously said, fallow deer are most active at first light and last light, so that in itself presents you with the problem of low light. Because of this, I would advise you to use either a tripod or a monopod, and what that does is it allows you to get the slow shutter speeds that you'll need under low light conditions. Having said that, don't be afraid of high ISOs, especially if you do post-processing. Modern day mirrorless cameras, whether full frame or crop sensor, they deal with high ISO very well, especially when you're post-processing them. So don't be afraid of high ISOs either. When it comes to equipment for photographing deer, I would recommend the following. either a full frame or a crop sensor camera. Telephoto zoom lens, this is a 100 to 500, and again a tripod or a monopod. When it comes to camera settings, if you've got eye detection, animals for autofocus, and set it to that. The subject, the fallow deer, is quite a large subject, so with eye detection they've got big eyes, it will snap onto it straight away. My go-to exposure settings are as follows: f7.1, they are large animals, 1/1000th per second, and auto ISO. Now, depending on the light, the only change that I'm going to make is my shutter speed. So I've set it to my aperture 7.1, f8, something like that, and I've set it to auto ISO. Once that's set, I don't touch it. The only thing I'm going to change is my shutter speed. Once you've got your record shots of your subject, and look to try and get images of the fallow deer in their natural environment. One thing to remember is to be aware of your highlights. On some of the tan, fawn coloured fallow deer, they have bright white spots and bright white necks. So it would be advisable to set your highlights, alerts, or sometimes known as blinkies, and use them just to keep an eye on your highlights. Top tip, natural backgrounds. Once you've got your record shots of the deer, what you then need to do is try and think about photographing the deer against a natural background. Deer parks can get very busy. They are very busy places, as I said earlier, people walking around, people jogging, people with dogs, etc. Avoid backgrounds containing things like buildings, fences and other man-made subjects, so that you can try and get the subject, the deer, against a natural looking background. What I'd like to do now is just leave you with some of my favourite images of the enchanting fallow deer, and I hope that you enjoy them. Thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and the fallow deer, and how to approach them and the techniques and tips to photograph them. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I say it every time, I absolutely love getting out and photographing wildlife here in the UK and being able to share it with other people. All I would ask is that if you've liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography? It's completely free, it doesn't cost anything, and hit the like button. And what that does, it just allows me to build the channel and get the channel out to more people, which is what I love to do, and it's the whole purpose of my channel, is to share my experiences of wildlife and nature with other people around the world. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.